Scruffy Audio Network.
Hey, we're finally doing it here on a Friday morning, guys. How is everybody? All right, good? All right. Thanks for asking. Hey, I got a special guest today. This guy has been with me about 20 years. He's one of my best tools in the toolbox. His name is Graeme Keys. He's a PT. He is the man, the myth, the legend, as everybody says. He has helped so many of my clients and athletes. Graeme, welcome to the show, my man.
Thanks for having me on, Charlie. I appreciate it, man.
Man, I'm so glad we're doing this, and I know you're a busy guy and have to get back to work. But thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. That's our producer, Ben. He looks like Burt Reynolds, a younger version. I got so many things to go over with because we never get this time to talk, and because I always bring athletes or clients in, and then we joke around in there. But then you got to get to work and do what you do. I open up every show for the listeners and viewers out there. The one question that I ask all the athletes and CEOs is, when did you know that you were different? Now, with you being a PT guy, when did you know that you wanted to be a PT guy?
Yeah, no, that's a good, and that goes way back then, right? When I knew I wanted to be a PT, I was probably 15, 16. And, it's interesting, about 4 years ago, I read this book, Simon Sinek, Start With Why, and he basically was asking you, why do you do what you do? And it was trying to get you to be a better version of you being you. Self-help books, of course, that's my jam, right? So when I was reading this, he was asking you, why do you do this? Why am I a PT? And it took me back to think about, well, why did I become that? Why was I a 15-year-old who wanted to be a PT? And it was kind of a cool sort of journey back, because I did know why. And it was my mother, when I was about 11 years old. She had terrible back and leg pain, terrible back sciatica, right? And we drove her around the country. My father drove her everywhere, trying to get someone to help her. And nobody could. So she saw a therapist, she saw a chiropractor, she saw an osteopath, she saw faith healers, bone setters, you name it, we saw them, right? But it never helped her. So about a year and a half we did this for, and finally she got with a doctor, and finally she ended up having surgery. Well, that's 30 odd years ago. Surgery was a big deal in the spine back then, and it still is, but it's certainly not what it was back then. Well, she did fantastic. She did super well, and right afterwards the doc said, you need to get active and you need to stay active. And it was kind of one of those moments for Mom where she turned that into a new career choice. She actually became a aerobics instructor. So she took the getting active, getting moving really literally to heart, became an aerobics instructor. So we opened up a gym, and on we went. So as I was doing this self-reflecting on, why am I a PT? It was because I don't want another patient coming in and doing a year and a half of spinning wheels trying to find a solution. And I wanted to be some part of that solution. Even if it wasn't me helping them, it's getting me to the next guy that can. So it was looking at every patient that walks in the door and going, that's someone's mom or dad or brother or sister. And my role now is to not waste their time, get them better. And if I can't get them better, get them to the guy that can. So that was my moment of becoming a PT in a sense. And then, I knew you were going to ask this question, so because I've actually listened to your podcast now.
He cheated.
It's the first podcast I've ever listened to, so
I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Charlie. You're welcome.
Thank you, subscribers. Look at those numbers, Ben. We got to get them up. Get them up.
So, but I looked at it and I go, what was my moment as a PT that sort of changed my entire trajectory of my career? So I was 22 years old. I was a PT. I was real lucky. I went to PT school at 18.
And where are you from? Because your accent is not from the mountains of Tennessee.
I ain't from around here.
Hello.
I'm originally from Northern Ireland.
Got
born and raised, right? So I came to the States in January of 97. Won my green card on the lottery. I won the lottery.
I remember you talking about that.
Yeah, so that's nuts, right? It means I can't win it again, I suppose, right? So no point in me buying a Powerball ticket this weekend. But
it was hard to get here.
Yeah, no, it definitely was. I was very fortunate. I was very lucky. So I was a PT back home for a couple of years, but left because I won the lottery to come to America.
But you wanted to come here?
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't wait to get here. Couldn't wait. The adventure was like, America's still painted like back home with us as the land of opportunity where the streets are paved with gold and stuff like that. And it is. And I'm here to say it still is. Like there's nothing but opportunity, but you got to work. You got to work hard for it, you know. And that was all I wanted, was that chance to go and work hard for it. So I got it. So I came over in 97, but I had just got out of PT school, right? And I didn't have a full job. I had a job, but it wasn't permanent. So I said, I'm going to go on this continued education course, right? Because this CEU course was going to look better on my resume versus all the mates that were in my class and they weren't on it. So I paid for this. I didn't have 2 pennies to scratch together. I had to borrow a penny to have 2 to scratch together, right? So, but I paid for this course, went on credit, paid for this course, took time off work to go on it. And it was a McKenzie course. McKenzie is a method of therapy, if you like. But so I said, I'm going to go on this course and just look different on my resume. And the irony of the story was my boss at the time, then all of a sudden she said, "Nah, you can't go on it. You can't, because other people have to go on it and you're not a permanent staff member, so you have to work." And I was so pissed off about this. Like, I was so annoyed. And I remember just fortuitously I go home and I get another call from another hospital that says, "Hey, we've got a 6-month contract for you." I only had a 4-month contract. "We've got a 6-month contract. Do you want to do it?" I was like, "Can I start after this course? Because I paid for it." And they went, yeah, you can start whenever. So I went back the next day, resigned from that job and said, "I'm doing this course." Because I got a real stubborn streak in me, right? So I said, "I'm doing this course." And I did the course, maybe out of spite for not being able to being told not to do it. But as soon as I did the course, that was it. My entire PT career is on that sort of decision, because the McKenzie method changed everything about the way that I was going to approach patients from now on.
And what's so different about the McKenzie method?
Yeah, good question. So, like, it's a hard one to put into. We could do a whole podcast on the McKenzie method, but in a nutshell, right? It's not just treating a symptom, right? And we're probably going to talk about some of this, but it's not where you go, "Here, I've got some tightness in my hamstring. Can I get some ART on that? Can I get some dry needling on that? Can I get some cupping on that?" It's not that. It's looking at it and it's saying, well, what can make your hamstring hurt? What other structures are there? What can we do? Where's the source of that pain? And what do we need to do to the source of your pain, not the output of your pain? So it's much more about classifying things, first of all, through your assessment and what's going on, and then addressing your treatment to the right area. And it's a really well-researched sort of approach now. Spine pain mostly, but certainly some peripheral joint problems as well. But I always tell patients, like, my analogy that I give patients all the time is, if you are a man and you have a heart attack, a lot of the times your symptoms are chest pain, chest pressure, arm pain, left arm pain, and left jaw pain, right? So when you go into the ER and someone says, "I've got chest pain, arm pain, jaw pain," they rush you into the back. But when they rush you into the back, no one rushes to treat your jaw, right? Because that's a symptom, but it's not the origin. And if they did rush to treat your jaw, you weren't going to last very long. They needed to fix your heart. They needed to go there. But that's a referred symptom that's coming from the actual origin. Well, that's no different if you're treating someone who has, quote, hamstring pain, and they start treating the hamstring, but the origin's in their low back. And that, to me, was what the McKenzie method helped me do, was identify better where this was coming from. So that day that I took that course, came off of that course, and again, I did it out of spite, maybe, because I wanted to do a damn course. But whenever I did, that was my light bulb. That was my light bulb. But I felt like I needed to know this stuff better. I needed to spend now a career learning this McKenzie approach so that my patients, that I was hopefully destined to be a therapist and do good stuff so people's mothers didn't have back pain and leg pain for a while, that I needed to be better at doing that. So those were my 2 moments that I can look back and say, that was my defining moments in my career.
Well, and I think that's where the parallel of us getting together is you thinking hamstring, okay, where that pain comes from, and then that source to then what I do of when somebody goes, "I need my feet quicker," it's not your feet.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's the power above your feet. If that was the case, as you're a sports car guy, if I wanted my car faster, I don't go in and go, put faster tires on it.
Right.
It's the engine, it's the motor that moves the feet up and down. So I think that's why we've worked so well together the last 20 years, from, you know, the Chad Penningtons to the Harrison Smiths. You treated all my guys, and all of them, you know, think you're the goods. And I think that you, we talked about this before we got on air, of staying in your lane, of knowing what you're doing. And me studying a lot of these podcasts now and really diving into them, I'm really researching how a lot of people are turning your exercises into sports performance and functional training, which to me I think is a no-no of somebody doing a Basu ball single leg squat with weights and they think they're strong. And, oh, well, that's functional, and I don't understand the functionality of that. Elaborate on, like, we talked about that too, of like the athletes going, well, I Googled this. I find in my genre of sport, it's the same thing as, well, I Googled how to get faster. Oh, okay, did you? You know, we have different athletes that come in and ask all different questions of ART or cupping or dry needling. And what's your theory on watered down, or everybody's in different lanes? And then, like you said, which I know for facts, you have PT people that are going, well, I can make you faster. Mm-hmm. You know, whether it's on this machine or I could teach you the mechanics. Then they cross over to not knowing what they're doing. Like, I stay in my lane, and the first thing I always say when people have injuries with anything, go see my guy. Right. I'll make a call, go see my guy, and it's Graeme Keys, and go see him. And then you give me feedback that is amazing on text messages, and we work well together. And you do the same when you have people that come in to rehab a knee, mostly girls this last summer. Hey, go see Charlie. You know, not only is he going to get you stronger, but he's going to give you that attitude, you know, of, you know, you're in the Woodgym and you got that swag about you.
Yeah.
So, you know, elaborate on the ARTs, the dry needlings. Where does all that, how is all that placed?
You know, it's been really interesting in my profession watching this sort of shift, like you said, and we talk about it in the clinic quite a bit, you know, with some of the other therapists and stuff. And we've sort of given it this term where we call it a la carte PT.
A la carte.
Right? So you go and you get your steak, and then you go, no, I really want to have, fries along with that. But no, I want garlic mash. No, tonight I want those tempura fried onion rings. And they've started to treat PT in a certain, similar way, you know, because we've got access to all this information on Google, right? We've got all this information about, well, this person did this and this person's done that. And then you look at their Instagram and they go, this is the best thing since sliced bread right over here. Why would you not believe it if you're out there? If you're out there hurting, you'll look and do anything. 30 odd years ago, we did with my mother, right? But people are still doing it. They just have way more access to information about what it is. So in a sense, you could say that you have a much better educated client or much better educated patient coming in. But unfortunately, what you really have is you've got someone coming in and they haven't put clinical reasoning behind it. And what I mean by that is, my analogy would be, if you're a patient out there and you wake up one morning and your buttock's sore and you've got butt pain and maybe thigh pain, and you hop on the old Dr. Google, right? And you put in buttock pain, thigh pain. Your first 5 posts that you get, they're all paid for, right? So they're all SEO marketing that has driven them to the front page because they're specialists in a certain thing. So up comes this guy and he goes, Piriformis this. Next guy says, ooh, Piriformis this and Piriformis that. So you've got 3 or 4 people that are all talking about the same sort of thing. So you're the patient and you go, well, my symptoms look like that. They sound like that. I think I've got Piriformis syndrome. So off you run to your doctor and you say, Doc, I think I've got Piriformis syndrome. Now, maybe he worked you in that day. Maybe it was, maybe he's busy. And he maybe just does a cursory exam and pokes around on you, and maybe he's not familiar with it as much. And he goes, yeah, maybe you do have Piriformis syndrome. So he writes a little referral to go to see the therapist, and he writes Piriformis syndrome. Now, a therapist that's using that true inductive reasoning process, in other words, just being told what to do and doing it, they start treating Piriformis syndrome. And 4 weeks later, that patient is no different because it's not Piriformis syndrome. But no one's asked the question because they're all wanting that a la carte treatment that says, cup my piriformis, needle my piriformis, do some ART stretching on my piriformis. And whilst all those things are good, if you like, they're not treating the right tissue. And that's been my big sort of thing. Like we're talking there about staying in your lanes. My lane isn't to find a thing to stick into that muscle and needle it or massage it or stretch it. My lane is to say, why aren't you moving well? Where is the limitation in the movement? And then can we move that better? Can we get a better symmetry going on up in that joint or in that spine? And then after we have done enough of that, and we get them to the point now where they don't have a pathology, we can hand them over to the sports guys, and we can hand them over to the trainers and say, look, this person now no longer has a problem in terms of pathology, but they're not as strong as what they can be. They're not as fast as what they can be. You mentioned the girls. We have sent a couple of girls this last year, ACL repairs, and both of them did fantastic. When they got here, they took off. But when they got here, their pathology wasn't there anymore. They had done enough rehab in their ACL program to get them to the point where they were strong and they were functional, but they weren't at the point where they were playing Division 1 volleyball and Division 1 soccer. And that's what they needed. They didn't need me to do that, right? I didn't need to spend more time working on whatever with them. I needed to hand them on and say, right, Charlie, do you. Take them from this level to that level. But it goes right back to that whole, in my mind anyway, it goes right back to that, what structures are we treating and who's doing the deciding of what needs to be treated. Dr. Google doesn't need to be doing it, right? The physician, the PT, they need to be coming up with it. But that's called hypothetic deductive reasoning, where you come up with what are all the potential things that might be going on, and then we have to test each one of them and come up with the best plan, get that pathology taken care of, and then pass them on if that's what they need.
All right, so you mentioned an osteopath, and I know that some of my clients, worked with those guys. Describe what an osteopath is.
Yeah, so look, there's almost two different schools of osteopathy. There's the American school of osteopathy, and then there's the rest of the world's osteopathy, because I actually studied quite a bit with some of the osteopaths out of the Royal School in the UK, Royal School in London. Daryl Herbert was one of the guys I took a bunch of classes with. And it is manipulative medicine, right? So in other words, it is moving joints, it is moving soft tissue, it's manipulation. Some people call that adjustments in other fields. But
is it a correlation to ART?
No.
Not at all?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, everyone's got a different flavor, but, bourbon comes in bourbon can be called bourbon, but it can also be, the different flavors, it can be weeded, it can be, so yeah, it's all movement, it's all stretching, right? That's how I see it. It's movement, whether it's a manipulation or whether it's an exercise. But true osteopathy came out of that. In America, the osteopaths, a lot of the osteopathic schools do incorporate that into their care, but they're also trained like an MD. So a lot of the osteopaths here, they come out and they are working as if they were an MD because they have all that training also. And they sit boards and they're able to practice as your primary care doctor, as your OBGYN, obviously depending on their specialty and their residencies. But unfortunately, it takes them away from being a true osteopath. And that's touching people, maneuvering, mobilizing things. And in a way, that's what's kind of given me an opening in the world of PT, because a lot of PTs don't necessarily go down that path of getting their hands on things, mobilizing stuff, and moving the joints in the spine or otherwise. So I've felt like I've moved into that sort of little void that's been left, because osteopathy in America has begun to look a little bit more like being an MD in America. I still think the world of DOs over here, I think they do a fantastic job, and they really try to look at people more holistically as well. But the system doesn't always allow them to. Like, I always chat with them. LMU is a great DO program, and I see a lot of their students whenever they're out and about, and I'm talking with doctors. And I always ask them, do you want to practice with manual medicine whenever you grow up and become a real doctor, And they're like, yeah, I really do. I just don't know how. I don't know what system I'm going to be in to allow that to happen. And I think that's a shame for them, because patients really would need it. Patients love that hands-on approach. Patients love you taking enough time to feel stuff, to put your hands on stuff, to move stuff, and then to get them doing it and taking some responsibility for their own problem. And that's a great area that the traditional osteopaths in the UK or in Australia and New Zealand that they've really filled a nice void with, and we've lost it a bit here in the US.
Well, that brings me to the next question: is recovery and rehab overdone? Is it overcooked? Is there too many things? As you were just in here this morning, and an athlete was asking, hey, are you an ART guy? And you basically said no and left it at that. Is there too much? I mean, can you work, say, with Petrone and Graeme as a client or athlete and covering all bases, be good enough? Or is that now not only is it acupuncture, now it's dry needling? Now it's cupping. Yeah. It went from deep tissue massages isn't enough to scraping to now you got the guns, that are doing the thing. And it's like, whatever happened to just sleep, recovery, rest, and train?
Look, I don't know where we got so super complicated with all this stuff, but in a way, maybe I do. Maybe that fringe stuff was out there before, but now we all see it. We see it every day. We see it on our Instagrams. We see it on Facebook. We see it on in the coverage of professional athletes. Like, you look at it. You've worked with professional athletes your entire career. They're easier to take on that new fad thing because it's so available to them, right? And because it's so available to them, they go, well, I like this gun, and I'm all for gun control only in the PT clinic. All right,
right.
No other gun reform for me. But let's stay apolitical. Isn't that what you said? Right. But again, it's those things that people start seeing it, and then you get these influencers, and these influencers are out there on social media. And it trickles down fast, right? And it trickles down, so therefore we all go, well, I'd like this, or I'd like that, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. And I think that's a big shame of what's happening, because you're absolutely right. What is wrong with really training hard, spending some time recovering? And recovery is not just rest. Recovery is rest, for sure, as it's sleep. But it's also making sure that you've got the right nutrition put up in there, the right hydration put up in there. And I'm speaking out of my league here. I got to stay in my lane, bro, right? But I do know that that's good stuff. But movement, right? If you look at physical therapy from the get-go, we were always wanting to be experts in movement, just experts in movement. But we've got a little fancy, and now my dry needling and my tape that I use and my this and that. Look, these are all useful things that absolutely can help every athlete that's out there and can absolutely help every patient that's out there. But once you build your platform of therapy and recovery around those things, rather than around the rock of you're not moving well, you've got some sort of movement dysfunction there. And when you don't fix and change that, there is no amount of dry needle and cupping, taping, ART that is going to fix that root problem. And I can't tell you how many times in the clinic I see people coming in who have done all these fad type things, I'll call them. But when they come in and you look, you just go, wait, you're not moving your neck to the right side because the joint's not moving. I'm going to get my hands on there, move that joint a little bit. I reckon if I move it a bit, teach you how to keep it moving, that you can go back to Chaz and do everything that he's going to want you to do, and my job's done. It's going to be a very short sort of time with me, and I don't have to get over cooking it in terms of all the extra things that we need to do. We just need to get it moving. But that's not sexy, Movement's not cool, right? Movement's boring. So let's fancy it up and make it look, frilly. Like, look at the Woodgym. We were just saying, 20 years, this place hasn't changed a whole lot. But the stuff that's happening in it, that's changing every day, and that's developing and that's growing. But it still comes back down to, if you're weak, we're going to get you strong. And then as we get you strong, we need to get you flexible so that you can get speed. Those are the core principles that you're living by, but I'm doing no different than clinic. It's just that we've got so many of these fancy little tools out there. Yeah, I want to sort of step away from some of those tools until I need them. But that comes after making sure that they've got the movement.
What's funny is the new age athlete doesn't talk about the one word that we use, my old man used all the time, and that's chiropractors. You don't hear about chiropractors as much anymore, from the cupping, the dry needling. We get into a place where the PT guy and the trainer cross over. It's almost not enough anymore to get an answer, say from Graeme. Say an athlete has a quad strain, okay, and you diagnose him with a quad strain, send him back over to me. He's ready to go, but he's still not ready to go because he's sought out other advice and doing other things, and then he's more mentally unprepared to go than physically prepared to go. How do you handle those types that go, well, let me go in and let me get a second opinion, or let me fly somewhere, or drive somewhere, and where he's ready to go, if he's doing this and this. It's almost like there's too much access to too much information, to where it's overload, to where either you're slow and we get you faster, or you're weak and we get you stronger. It's almost like that's not, what's the word? That's not hip enough. That's not the swag for 2019. I got to go see this guy, that guy, this guy, this guy, that guy. And working with Pennington all those years, from 15 years of age and up, I was always his core guy. And we might go out and seek a Graeme Keys or a throwing specialist for his mechanics, but it was still... I always go back to it, and there's a song out there the girls turned me on to, my girls years ago, Back to the Basics. And if you notice, that's what everybody usually does after they've stepped out to all these other genres, and they go, you see it all the time in the fighting world, which boxing is my number one sport. I mean, and you see it even in movies, from Rocky III, where he gets his ass kicked and has to come back. Apollo brings him back to the basics. Creed to Creed II, he goes back to the basics and goes out in the desert. And when you see all these guys, even in the real world of the professional boxing, when they get their ass kicked, they go back to the basics. And I'm never going to go from that or stray away from that. And you just see a lot of the athletes with the medical treatments. It's like a buffet. And how does that affect you, as you being the best at what you do, and people coming to you and then going, well, and you're like, okay, well, I know what it is, but you're not going to trust me. So how do you take that patient, client, athlete? Yeah,
look, that's always been a struggle in a sense, but probably earlier in my career it was a struggle because of ego, right? Oh, I know how to help you. And as a 47-year-old now, it's not about that anymore. It's come back around to, at some point, this person may be ready to hear this, but right now they're not.
Great point, because that's exactly how you treated that person in my office this morning, with class and professionalism, but almost like he's not ready.
Yeah.
And I'm not ready to waste my time of trying to sell him on spine, sport, Graeme Keys. That's why he's the man, because he gives no F's about it. That way you either understand and come to me and listen, or I'm not going to.
Right. And look, I'm sure you've seen this time and time again. People come in, they start working with you, and then they start to drift a little bit, and they maybe go away. And don't get me wrong, like, you've had the guys that have been here since they were 15, the Chads and the Harrisons and stuff. But you've probably seen plenty of people come and go, and then when they do come in and when they do click, then off they go. I was listening to Hoches, and he was saying, like, whenever that click sort of happened, away he went, and then he could see that success, but he was ready for that and ready to hear it. It's no different in an athlete's recovery. Like, there's times when they're spinning wheels. We always talk about it. They're just spinning tires right now. They're looking for something that maybe gets them a little traction, because there's been so much frustration, because there's been so much stuff given, and none of it really addressing where their limitation might be. And sometimes the answer is too simple. Sometimes it's too simple, right? One of the things, actually, Robin McKenzie, back to the McKenzie method thing, he talked about it. The beauty about the McKenzie method is that it's so simple. And the difficulty about the McKenzie method is it's so simple. So you've got that person that comes in and they get this simple response and they clicks and they go, boom, I'm in. This is it. I'm 100% on this. And then you get the guy that comes in and goes, can't be that easy. I need to do something else. I need to look at this. I need to look at that. I need to blah, blah, blah. And look, you can take this to a point. As I said, 25 years I've been in it. And when I first started, I don't ever remember anyone talking about a hip labral tear, right? We didn't do surgery 25 years ago on hip labrums. And now we've got femoral acetabular impingement, we've got cam lesions, we've got labral repairs, we've got all that stuff. Now, I'm not saying that stuff's not good. We've obviously gotten better MRIs and better stuff to do it. But the frequency with which we end up getting there is so great right now, so much different than what we did 25 years ago. But I think people were still having the similar problems 25 years ago, but they did one thing different. They did a lot more movement, right? They did a lot more active stuff that in itself sometimes fixed the problems. So the ones that we should be fixing are the ones that are really never going to do well on their own anyways. But maybe we're fixing stuff that doesn't need to. We see that in the spine. We see that absolutely. We're doing more spine surgery than what we've ever done before, but our outcomes aren't any better. We see it in the knee where, finally they've come out and have said, you know what, meniscus surgeries in the knee, they're not really that effective, and the outcomes are probably as good as if we did nothing and we just did rehab and we just kept them moving. And so the more that we learn, the more that we do, the more we realize that the basics are still the basics. The fundamentals are still the fundamentals. But there's so much access to so many different things, and the higher level you get, the more clouded that becomes, and therefore the more you spin. I look at some of the high school athletes that we get right now, and it's fantastic. They go, they see their doc, their sports medicine doc says, go see Graeme, go see Holly, let's see what they can do. We keep it simple, we get them moving. It's so pure, all they want to do is play on Friday night. You get them ready for Friday night, and they're happy as could be. They couldn't be happier. They're not spinning looking for, I need to go and see this specialist, I need to go and see that. They just want to get, tell me something, give me a solution, give me something that I can take ownership of, and away you go. But as that goes up to the next level, and goes up to the next level, and goes up to the next level, that's when they're spinning. That's when they're dipping. They're dipping here, they're dipping there. And I've got to the point where I've decided I'm just going to let that person continue to go. I want to strongly sell them on the simplicity of what I want to give them, and I want them to continue down the path that I see is best for them, but I'm not going to fight them anymore. And I'm going to let them do their little spin and then be right there for them when they come back, and not take it in a way that goes, well, he didn't listen to what I was telling him, I have no time for him. No. I'm going to leave it open and say, this is what my solution looks like, this is how I see it progressing, this is where I see you going. If you need to go and do this, or if you need to go and see this guy, and if you need to do that, that's absolutely fine. Whenever you need anything else, come back and take a look. We'll see what we need to do and pick it up from there. So, we talked about my big mission this month is do more. Mm-hmm. And I'm doing a 6-part series with Dr. James Chu. And, you're part of this roundtable discussion also where you move more. You've always done that. So your big thing, I've come to you with 2 major injuries myself, and your big thing is let's do everything we can before surgery. Mm-hmm. So you're big on let's not just go to back surgery, knee surgery, hip surgery. Let's do everything possible. And that book you gave me, or you go, I can't give you my book because it's a very expensive book, but go buy it. And it was $150, $175 book. And the methods that you talk about of moving from a calf strain. I had an athlete in a boot. You're like, get him out of the boot as soon as possible, get him going. I blew my hamstring on the turf racing these yahoos one year, and I had to go to Miami the next day. I remember it.
And you said, okay, this is what you're going to do. You're going to do this in the sand. You're going to jog. And I'm like, dude, I'm on crutches. My hamstring's black and blue. You're like, I don't care. So when Chad got me off the plane, he's like, what the hell happened to you? You're supposed to help me. And we're doing your rehab on the beach before we have to train. So your big thing is a movable joint, is a happy joint or muscle flow. Yeah. Explain that. Yeah,
it definitely is. Like, go back to the days whenever we were told, what do you do when you first have an injury, right? Everything
Shake it off.
Other than rub dirt in
Suck it up, let's go.
The big thing was the RICE regime, right?
Right.
Rest, ice compress, and elevate.
Right,
and then we changed that a little bit, and we said, ooh, we need to put an M in front of the R, so it's movement rest, ice, compress, and elevate. And I always felt that just didn't work because it needs to be a cool acronym for it to work, right? Well, we've got a cool acronym again, and it's called POLICE, right? We need to police injuries. And I love the whole thing of it. We're policing injuries, right? But the I and the C and the E still stand for the same. Ice things, compress things, and elevate things. That still makes good sense. We want to manage inflammation and allow the best possible repair. And I say manage inflammation because we don't want to stop it. Inflammation's really good.
Right?
It's really good, right? It brings all the stuff that helps with repair. It also eats the dead tissue up, right? Little macrophages, little Pac-Man eating up all that dead tissue, bringing in new fibrin and fibrinogen, letting it get laid down, getting you a nice repair, and then remodeling it. Inflammation's essential. But the body doesn't know how to limit that. It just gives so much. So we're always trying to manage inflammation, compress it, and elevate it. So that stays the same. But the P, the O, and the L now stands for something that I can get behind 100%. First of all, we got to protect it, right? So if you've had a hamstring injury, the next thing was we're not going to say, go and do some more sprints. But we're going to say, we do need to move you, but we need to protect how you move, right? And then the O and the L is what we call optimal loading. And optimal loading changes from day to day, session to session, week to week, depending on what the injury was. So optimal loading in that early hamstring strain that you had was it needs movement, but it doesn't need movement beyond what it can tolerate. It can tolerate some eccentric control, but it can't tolerate concentric, and it needs to stay away from plyometric. So those are some of the things that we as therapists end up spending a lot of our time is, what is the optimal load that this muscle, ligament, joint, whatever soft tissue that we're dealing with, what can it take, right? What is the optimum amount so that we're doing something to improve that new scar tissue that's laying down without doing too much that ends up setting them back. So as we kind of go through and we think about how are we going to manage that athlete early, we're going to be policing that injury to kind of get them where we need to get. But that involves movement. That always should involve movement with something. So an early active approach is absolutely what's going to be necessary, but without pushing that tissue beyond what it's capable of early.
Well, and that's how I described Graeme all these years is all the athletes, clients, whoever comes through here. I'm like, get ready. You know, he's not going to brace you up. He's not going to put you in slings, splints, casts, whatever. He's going to get you moving. So I've labeled you as like the movement guy.
Yeah. Oh, look, that's all I ever want to be. I want to be the guy that helps get movement and gets people moving. I remember we saw a big defensive end for you one time out of Baylor. Mm-hmm. Blew his quad.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember seeing it and sort of going, wow, this is about as bad as what I've seen.
Right.
And we got him looked at. I remember we got him looked at by one of the docs. Mm-hmm. And he gave us the all clear. And I'm like, all right, we got to move this. We got to get you moving because you're going off for pro day in another 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it was.
Right. And if he would have had surgery, he would have been out for the year.
Yeah, he'd have been done. Yeah. Absolutely would have been done. Now, fortunately, he wasn't completely ruptured. He was tore. Mm-hmm. I can't remember what grade, but whatever it was.
It was bad.
It was bad. It was. And he was scared. Like you know, you're talking about athletes and you're talking about the physical and the mental side. We could talk all day about the effects of the mental.
He passed out in the doctor's office. Yeah. When we were walking out, he was so frantic because these guys put so much on the pro day and the combine. He went to the ground. Yeah. Like went to the ground. I had to catch him, and he was a big boy to catch. And the nurse, everybody was like, I was like, he's all right. He's just that nervous, that shook up, or whatever happened. Yeah, so you got him moving.
Yeah, we did, and that was it. We got him moving early, and I was lucky. I mean, I have what's called an anti-gravity treadmill, right? So it's called an Alter G, and I can take their body weight off. So I had him in that Alter G at 20 or 30% of his body weight, walking, jogging, running. And I remember because he was so bloody big and his legs were huge, I was worried that as he would run, his stride was going to kick the back of this thing. But when he got to that point and when he could see that he could move again, didn't matter that he was running at 35%, 40% body weight. When he could see that he could move, his entire mental aspect of the whole thing changed. Mm-hmm. And he started to go, I can go to my pro day. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can. Mm-hmm. But you still got work to do. You still got to move. You still got to work with Chaz. You still got to do all these things. But that was that sort of click where he goes, I can still do this. And that comes from movement. But what if I'd have laid him on the bed and had spent all this time rubbing and cupping and needling and stretching and taping? Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong, we did some of that stuff, but that wasn't the core of our program. Our core of our program was motion, movement. I always say, motion's lotion, movement is medicine. That's kind of, I say that all the time in the clinic, and patients are like, yeah, all right.
I like that. I might use that out one night.
Totally. You can totally use it. Hashtag motion is lotion.
Ben, we're going out tonight. Yeah, and matter of fact, that guy went on and played with the Houston Texans and ran his 40 and did everything. Because you're a crucial part of it. I mean, and I know we got to wrap this up. My man's got to get going, and sorry for the mechanical difficulties, Ben. But this place wouldn't be going, and I wouldn't be who I am without you right by my side with all my guys. And I appreciate that so much, and I appreciate you taking care of all my people, all my family on the QTs, from running them through to not running them through. Coming to my house, taking a look at me, and I love you, and I support the hell out of you.
Chaz, appreciate you. Love you back. I mean, this has been a fun 20 years.
It has been 20 years with this guy, and I don't see myself doing anything different. I'm 51, and like Ben said, my Woodgym is my G4. Thank you, Graeme. I appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
You too, man.
You got a good picture? That was good. Awesome. Do you like it? He's super smart, isn't he?